engaging the former Minister of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, Mahama Ayariga. He was minister at the time that we saw about 150 people die at Circle. One of the things he did was close down a lot of fuel stations. That conversation will come. But here's what he had to say about the situation at the UPSA.
But you go and then you see that they have a valid permit. They have the permit from the District or Metropolitan Assembly. They have the permit from the National Petroleum Authority. They have the permit from the EPA. They have permit from Town and Country Plan. They have all the permits that you ordinarily would require that they obtain.
That they had to operate.
And they have it, but even an ordinary person looking at the location will imagine that there's a problem with that location. And so for me, it was just going beyond, yes, I have a permit, to scrutinizing the rationale. I mean, how did you issue a permit to a site like this? And so I went to the site with the officers, and even from a layman's perspective, asked certain critical questions which I realized many of them could not answer. For instance, I went to Kumasi, I think it was Islamic Secondary School, one such secondary school, and directly opposite them, there was going to be a gas station like the one that exploded yesterday, the day before yesterday. And the students mobilized against the permitting. The EPA issued the permit subject to some measures that they asked the operator to put in place. But the students just insisted that they didn't want a gas station directly opposite their school. So
why don't you even give people a permit and expect them to do what they are supposed to do before they acquire the permit, after they have acquired the permit? It doesn't work like that.
No, you don't give them the permit before you tell them what to do. You give them what to do as a precondition. So you say, okay, I'll give you a permit, but subject to you constructing a 5-inch thick concrete bunker where we expect you to install the gas tank, and we want you to install the tank underground instead of the normal arrangement where the tank is on the ground and all that. So you give them all these conditions, but the students demanded, and I told them that, you see, one of the conditions is that the people in the immediate vicinity should accept the facility being there, because even if you dealt with the natural issues, which is underground tanker, thick concrete wall, and etc. But if the young boys and girls in the school are against it, one of them, as part of the protest, one day can just, put fire to it.
That's a very interesting point to bring in, the UPSA issue. Now, the UPSA issue, that station, the filling station that's very close to the school, very close to the hostel, they got the permit during your administration, during the NDC's administration. The UPSA students agitated several times against it, but they're working. Today, they're agitating again. If you pull down a similar structure in Kumasi, why then is it's called Cell Filling Station still operating?
I shut it down. I shut Cell Filling Station down when I was minister.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I went there, and I had issues with them because, one, there's a restaurant there. Then there's a supermarket there. Then there's a church on the supermarket. Then there's a university directly.
Oh, that's opposite. Different. That's Engine. That's the one just opposite the UPSA. Yes. There's one right behind the UPSA. So it's like the UPSA is sandwiched between quite a lot of.
Well, I don't think I had any hand or I knew anything about it, because what I saw was the one in front of the university, and when I went there, I insisted that it should be shut down, and I gave my reasons. I said they should choose between one: either they are running just a fuel station, or just a restaurant, or just a supermarket and a church, but you can't have those three activities taking place there. After a while, they proved that they had permits and all sort of things. A lot of pressure.
Pressure from where?
When I left.
Start by asking you to describe for us in, let's say, 1 or 2 words, what were your feelings, your thoughts, and your emotions when you heard about what happened at Atomic Junction?
First and foremost, let me express my condolences to the bereaved families. About 7 people lost their lives, and also my sympathies to all those who are injured, and our prayers that God helps them to heal speedily. And of course also to many who have lost property as a result of the accident. For me, it's a worrying thing. I can relate the situation to the previous ones where I was deeply involved, and once again to imagine that many families will lose members, will lose breadwinners, that the property that people have worked tirelessly to acquire, that they have lost them within a very short period, and economic activities that sustain families will overnight be ruined. And of course, the destruction to the physical environment around that area. These are very worrying things that come to mind anytime that you see situations like this. But beyond that, the trauma that people living in the neighborhood, went through. I passed by the place, I spoke to family members, and many of them said they had to run long distance because the explosion came on, and then the gas.
They actually had no idea where they were going.
Where they were going, and some of them actually complained to me that the media is not adequately capturing the suffering of those of us who had to run several kilometers to stay away from.
To my question, sir. What were those words? How did you feel when you heard of it?
Terrible. I mean, you feel terrible. You feel terrible. And I think that there's a sense in which we have to distinguish this one from the previous one. The previous one was, in a sense, a natural accident, in the sense that...
Is there anything like a natural accident?
Yes, in the sense that, you see, there was rain in excess of what we would have expected, and there was excessive flooding. And I think it was a situation where there was a leakage, and then the oil spill, the petroleum product, whatever it was, diesel or petrol, spilled up to a point where there was contact with fire, and then it traced its route back.
Isn't it? It's not really so different if you look at it.
Yes, yes, not so different. I mean, it was the result of some leakage, one way or the other.
Yes. So let me move on, sir.
The point I want to make is that, first and foremost, you will usually want to wait and have the experts establish exactly what caused it. The reason is that if you don't establish what caused it, there's a danger of running around the usual suspects. The regulatory authorities are not doing their work. Politicians promise that they will clean up the system and fix it, and they haven't fixed it, it has occurred again, and etc. So it will be good to have a sense of exactly what caused. That's why I'm saying that at least we managed to know what caused the other one. This just happened.
Even though we did nothing with that knowledge?
I don't think we did nothing with that knowledge. I mean, those of us who are in a position of responsibility.
Right. In order for us not to jump the gun, let me just take this step by step. And my next question was going to be about the action that we took immediately after 2015, the disaster in 2015. One of the things you did as minister at the time was that, we saw how the fanfare, the media, the paparazzi followed you all over the place, pulling down fuel stations, and there was a public uproar as well. Let me first of all find out whether that was your decision as a minister at the time, or it was a cabinet-sanctioned action.
Well, it is the law. The law is that anybody who wants to engage in that kind of economic activity would have to obtain some permits. And so what I was doing was just to heighten the level of scrutiny to ensure that the regulatory authorities responsible for issuing those permits were doing their work properly. Because you look at it, you see that some gas stations and fuel stations are sited at places that you don't expect that ordinarily a gas station will be sited or a fuel station will be sited. But that is...
You mentioned a lot of pressure, because that's one of the problems that we're dealing with in this country. Pressure from where exactly?
First and foremost, you see, there is the regulatory authority, which is, let's say, the EPA. The minister is not entirely in control of the EPA. And the energy minister may not even be entirely in control of the NPA. The NPA has a board which reviews applications for permits. The minister only has 1 or 2 representatives on a board that may have about 10 people. So when somebody puts in an application, it goes to the technical officers who go and review the situation on the ground, who then make a recommendation to their board. Their board assumes that they know and accept the recommendations. Then they approve the issuance of a permit. The person now has a valid permit to operate a fuel station. Then as minister, you walk there and you purport to exercise your veto power and think that there's something wrong with it and direct that it should be shut down. He's holding a valid permit properly issued by your EPA.
So then the action of shutting it down in the first place was wrong.
Precisely. So the issue then is that, well, if you have a problem, you should take it out with your EPA that issued the permit, not to take it out on the investor who, on the strength of the permit having been issued, has invested his money in the enterprise. So those are the issues that, as politicians, you are then confronted. So you are engaged. Your EPA, you are engaged with the investor, you're trying to understand why you issued the permit. At the end of the day, you begin to want to sympathize with all the parties, and all that they will do is they'll go and say, okay, we will recommend additional measures. That's the technical people. So say, look, there are filling stations in the middle of Manhattan right before 100-story skyscrapers, and they are
and rightly so. So then the issue really is about standards.
So the argument is that it's not about the fact that he's constructing it, before a building or a commercial center. It's a question of what measures he or she has put in place. So, Minister, we have recommended these additional measures, and we think it should go. Okay. Then you have a problem, because
so that's how it ended. That's how it ended with that shutdown drive, so to speak, that you went on.
Absolutely. But then I always say that in spite of all that, if the people living by the establishment remain concerned and unhappy, then you have a problem, because in every environmental assessment there's something that you call social impact. So even if you do all the engineering work and the society around your enterprise still has an issue with it and don't accept it there, then there's still a risk.
Okay, so let me find out from you, what exactly what problem was that move supposed to deal with? Exactly what problem?
Well, first and foremost, it also turned out that there were many that didn't have the permits. They just didn't have the permits, and so you shut those ones down and insisted they should go for permits. And of course, the idea is that when they go for permits, the technical people will know if there are any additional measures that they need to put there to ensure safety. But the additional issue is some activities start taking place after the fuel station has been established. And I think that is where sometimes we forget to pay attention to. So, for instance, somebody wants to establish a fuel station. It's bare land. So EPA come, they look at it, okay, this is bare land. There are no physical structures around here. Even if there are, you must do the XYZ. Then after the person has established the filling station, then a woman comes and sets up some fire, and then she's roasting.
She's frying yam.
Frying yams.
Or doing chichinga.
Or, doing chichinga. Yeah, I mean, that's a typical example. Yeah. Or that the owner of the restaurant, the owner of the filling station, his wife manages to convince him that the portion of it that is supposed to be a small mart for selling toiletries and other things, they can convert into an additional restaurant and that kind of thing. And of course, there'll be some level of cooking. Even if you say they won't be cooking, there'll be heating and warming of things in a restaurant.
So if I get you right, and sorry to interrupt you, if I get you right, the point you're making is that between the issuance of permits and the time or the day, whatever, that the operation of the fuel gas station starts, there are lots of things that go on that need to be regulated.
Not just that, even after, long after the fuel station or gas station is in operation, developments that keep taking place around it need to be monitored. And the staff size of, let's say, the NPA doesn't permit it to do that effectively. The same with the staff size of, let's say, the EPA. But these are ordinary things that I believe that the police can assist to monitor, because the police strength on the ground is much, much bigger than the NPA or the EPA or all of them combined. And they are always monitoring developments in the community. So if the police become conscious of the fact that in addition to just fighting crime, that issues like this should not escape their radar, that when they are driving past a filling station, they must take note of the type of economic activities that are taking place within the vicinity of the fuel station and stop them from happening. Sometimes the owners of the station, either they are oblivious of the developments taking place around them, or that they have become sympathetic in such a way that some woman comes and she just asks for small space around to fry yam, hoping to get some of the market because people are converging around there. And so, you know,
it becomes a very dicey situation. And I can understand from a politician's perspective.
I think that the police and others should get involved. And when they are driving by a fuel station and they see developments around it, that shouldn't be taking place around a fuel station. They should assist to make sure that these things don't happen.
Well, that's if the police itself, the police service itself has enough men to protect us as a country, because that's also an issue that we can go on and on about. But let me find out from you, sir. We need to wrap up this conversation about this act that this action that you took of pulling down fuel stations. I mean, if we're to put that, juxtapose that with what has happened recently, would you say that it was an act in futility, that nothing really came out of it, that at the end of the day, you as the minister at the time and the NDC at the time could not really put in place any real policy adjustment that could help perhaps avoid or prevent what happened at Atomic Junction?
No, the policies are already in place. The legislation is there. The institutions are there. The problem is effectiveness in terms of enforcement. That's the main issue. We have laws regulating where to site and where not to site a gas station or fuel station. There are permits that you need to obtain from the local authorities, to fire service, to EPA, to NPA. So the regulations and the permitting, and within these institutions, they have the personnel to implement the policies and the laws. It's not as if we are lacking in laws and policies and institutions. We do have them. The issue is enforcement.
Did you at the time you were minister feel that? Yeah. Did you at the time feel that there were necessary adjustments, and that was the catch, that there was necessary adjustment to the policy as it existed? Because obviously, if we are not enforcing it, then we have failed the people of Ghana as an institution, as a government.
No, I think it's not about adjusting policies. I think it's about monitoring the people who are supposed to do the work. So the fact that once in a while your minister will come around and he will stop and he will ask, and if there's no valid permit, then he's going to know that you haven't done your work. Or that even if there was a permit, but you really cannot explain the basis for issuing the permit, then he's going to take you on. That, for me, was an additional measure. And so,
but to what end? You see the minister come and everybody, everybody's basically licking his boots, and he comes around and, throws his weight about a little bit, he goes away, and to what end? It ends there, basically.
No, it doesn't end there. At least it creates a certain consciousness. Your staff across the country know that, because we're three, myself, my two deputies, and there were regions that I never went to, and I sent my deputies. So it became routine that once in a while, every month or every 2 months, I will ask one deputy to pay a surprise visit to a particular region and go round. And they went round, and the media captured it, and then the people suddenly became aware that there was a minister in the region go around the stations and etc.
So someone would say they make steady.
No, it's not steady. It puts them on their toes, and in a sense, they know that. And the minister doesn't just go there alone. The minister will pick the EPA boss or the deputy EPA boss. And so and then some one or two other technical people. So there's some level of accountability that engenders, and I think that it should have continued. Whoever has taken over must realize that this is a problem that you must keep an eye on, because it has happened again. Not that that will totally stop any accident from ever.
So, what I wanted to find out from you is how you think this could have been prevented. Is that by the periodic meetings or the periodic show up of the minister in these places? Could that have prevented what happened? Because the NPA, I was listening to them today, said that they had gone there to review, their standards there, and had written to them that they were below standards or something like that, and that they should fix it. But obviously, it wasn't fixed, and now we're looking at 7 people who have died, or getting to about 70 of them still in hospital.
Precisely. So you see, there are regulations, there are policies, there are institutions, there are personnel. All these people did their work. What they didn't do was to enforce it effectively. Now, if you went there and if you did an assessment and if your routine checks indicated that, standards had not been met, were the measures you took adequate? That's the issue. Were they supposed to shut down immediately? Hold on until they fix that problem. If you didn't do that, then that is where you failed us. It's not because the ministers and parliaments didn't pass the right law or create the right institutions, not because you were not trained enough to know how to detect that standards were not met. You've been adequately trained to know. So every other institution has done its work. It's just the individual who is responsible for enforcement that has failed all of us. So for me, as I indicated...
So in this case, who do you think has failed the people of Ghana? The NPA, the EPA, the ministry?
It depends on the nature of the technical problem. If the technical problem is detectable by the NPA, then that's where the issue. But then also, who manufactured the cylinder? You see, because so many institutions play a role. For instance, the Atomic Energy Commission has a role to play in checking to ensure the integrity of the cylinder. They provide that service.
Do they?
They do provide this. I was. Oh, they do. They have the capacity. In fact, I think they are the main organization in the country that really has the capacity to check some of these things. So even the NPA and others, I think, engage them, their technical services. So there are all sort of institutions that play a role. So that's why
you mentioned influence. You mentioned a pressure. To what extent is political pressure a key thing to blame in what we are suffering today in terms of explosions, lack of regulations at the fuel stations, etc.? To what extent is political? Because oil, we know the oil industry, that there are big men in the oil industry, politicians, friends of politicians, etc. So for you, to what extent is political influence a real problem to this?
It's a major problem. I mean, I have to be very frank that undue political pressure is a reason why many filling stations get sited at the wrong places. And we're talking about problems at the level of, municipal chief executives who must issue permits to people to site gas and petrol stations at locations that they themselves know are not right. But then party cronies, big financiers come in and they insist, and sometimes they bend the rules in their favor. The same way those...
How many of them did you have to deal with as minister at the time?
Oh, I recall that these filling stations that I shut down, those are sometimes we had to pull down. Each time that you shut down a filling station, there was so much pressure on you. I mean, senior church leaders will call you. Big imams will call you. Your colleague ministers will call you. Your party functionaries on the ground will call you. And they will all try to show that this person who runs this filling station has been this helpful or that helpful to the church or to the community or to the party or to this. Is there nothing that can be done to ameliorate the situation so that he can continue?
How did you deal with it?
I mean, for me, I just said no, and I will refer you to the EPA people and say, look, deal with the EPA people if they think that there's something that can be done. But then the problem is that very often, people already had permits from the same EPA people.
So you think really, from what you're saying, it's as if the problem really lies at the doorstep of the EPA?
Not the EPA. I mean, I work with the EPA, and I know that there are people with a very high sense of integrity who work there. I related sometimes work quite closely with the NPA. I know there are people there with a high sense of integrity who will insist on the right thing being done. But very often, you know, it is not the people at the head office. It will be a district officer, some district officer in some remote location, and when supervision is lax, then they do whatever they want. Okay. That's why sometimes going out to the field so that the low-ranking officer within the EPA or the NPA knows that he is not going to do this thing without effective supervision, that somebody is watching. If
you were to advise the current Minister of Environment, assuming he will listen, what would you tell him?
The point is, let's not leave the issue to ministers, because that's the mistake that we make. One minister cannot really effectively oversee several thousand communities and the environmental issues in those communities. People have to, they themselves, take responsibility for their immediate environments. And the law enables them to do that. The law that says that permit should be issued also says that it should be issued subject to certain conditions having been met. And so any citizen who lives in the vicinity of a gas station or a fuel station has the right to go to court and challenge a particular permit on the ground that they think that the permit was issued without regard to the preconditions for the issuance of the permit. And I believe that a court of law will do justice for them.
Are we not destroying businesses by doing that rather than looking at the standards and making sure that we implement?
The first thing that ought to have happened is that the local planning authorities need to plan the areas well and zone areas for industrial and commercial activities and other areas for residential purposes. And if they were complying with this zoning arrangement, some of the problems that we have would not have occurred. So, for instance, if the zoning laws are respected and an area is zoned for residential purpose, and you go and then you rezone it for commercial and go and fit a filling station there without regard to the precondition for rezoning to enable a dangerous commercial activity to take place side by side with, you know, residential infrastructure, then of course people can challenge that.
Did you know about this particular filling station during your time as minister?
Oh, I live not far from the gas station, yes.
So what did you do at your time? I mean, seeing that it was obviously an inappropriate environment for...
I wouldn't say that where that gas station is an inappropriate environment. In all fairness, I know the area. I mean, I went to Legon, I graduated from Legon, so I know the immediate vicinity of the university. And I wouldn't say that at the time of the siting of that gas station, that it was an inappropriate area.
But you went round shutting down fuel stations. What was that a part of the places that you looked at, since it was very close to you?
At that time, no. At that time, I mean, frankly speaking, there are, I think, 2 new stations that have sprung up there. Indeed, last week when I was driving past, I saw that one hadn't even been commissioned yet.
So why didn't you go there during your tour?
No, I'm saying that these are recent developments, some of them.
Oh, so 2015 is just about the corner. That was when we lost the people and you went out shutting down the atomic station, yes.
No, so the stations are new. If you drive on that route, there's a
according to the MPA. No. According to the MPA, we're talking about the atomic station, the gas station, which exploded today. Yes. According to the MPA, they've actually been working for over 20 years, even before the NPA was.
I'm saying that I know that gas station, and I'm saying that at the time of the establishment of that gas station, one cannot say.
No, I'm talking about when you were minister. When you were minister and you were pulling down structures.
Even today, I will not say, in all fairness, that location is an inappropriate place, because there are no houses there. It's on the Legon side of the land. Okay. And you know, Legon is quite disciplined about the development on their side of the property.
But you know, you still have not answered my question. Because what I want you really to answer, sir, is why you did not go to this place, which is obviously familiar to you, like you're saying, but which we have seen today has exploded and caused accident, even though there was a leakage during discharge, we understand. But this was obviously a place close to you. When you were going down, looking, checking at fuel stations, this was one of the stations you shouldn't have missed.
No, I mean, I don't think so. The reason is that most of the places that we stopped were triggered usually also by community complaints. Very often I receive petitions, ministers receive petitions, and many of the stations that I went to that became the subject of discussion really was instigated by people petitioning, and I felt I needed to go there or send my deputy to go and look at it, and etc.
I'm still wondering how you missed it. But would you consider? I'll let you do so. But now that 7 people have died, many are in the hospital. Would you consider this as you failing the Ghanaian people by not paying attention to that particular one?
The point that I'm making is that I know that gas station, and I'm saying that one cannot say that the location is inappropriate for the siting of a gas station. So the NPA and the EPA clearly wouldn't have done something wrong by issuing a permit. The issue that may arise today may be a failure in some equipment there, and that is the responsibility of routine checks. And like they themselves have indicated, that they did go there, that they found out that there was a problem, that they recommended that the problem should be fixed, and it wasn't fixed. So it wasn't the issue of they citing a gas station there. But the point that I'm making is the activities that develop around it after the facility has been cited, because since the facility got cited there, a lorry station has emerged around there after the construction of the overhead and then the runabout. Yeah. So that has also increased the traffic around there. And very often there are times when you cannot convince me to drive there because it's so choked because of the traffic. So these new developments have increased the risk because of the numbers that are always there. And that's what I'm saying. I'm concerned about economic activities that come after these stations.
So where do we go from here?
That's what I'm saying, that other institutions should be mindful of their role to complement the efforts of the EPA and the NPA. So the NPA goes to a site, it is vacant, it's empty, then they issue a permit. Later on, GPRT decide to establish a lorry station nearby. Then the police are driving past every day. They see the build-up of human activity around a dangerous economic activity, and we all do nothing about it. That's why I'm saying that. Yes, so that's why I'm saying that we need to be active, not just when they are asking for permit, but long after they have obtained the permits and they are operating, and then people are building houses and approaching that economic activity. Then the town county planning and everybody else, the local chiefs keep selling the land, and then somebody wants to build a house and they still sell land for you to build a house by an existing fuel station. So I'm saying that let's be interested in the activities after the permitting, because very often the permitting may not be the problem, as in this instance. And I definitely would not have gone there because, frankly speaking, as I keep repeating, I know the location. I don't think that there is a problem with citing a gas station.
As far as you're concerned, the location was ideal.
At the time that
and this was in 2015, yes, 2 years ago.
Yes, the time the gas, and even as I speak, I know about 3 fuel stations that are emerging along that road. If you drive there, you will see them. There are 2 new ones not far from the gas station. There's one new one where we now have the KFC about 200, 300 meters away from the gas station. And just along that route, I can tell you which station is developing at what location because I've been observing. So it's not bad, but the discipline of making sure that we maintain the routine checks, that the people who are running these facilities know what they are doing, and that they engage people with the relevant qualification to work for them. For me, these are the issues that we must. And the general culture of everybody, playing their role. So it's not just the MPA, as I indicated. the residents, the resident association, a new development is taking place. It has some dangers. They should be interested.